When you buy your first home, you expect problems like leaky faucets or noisy plumbing. You don't expect a full-scale territorial war with the man next door. But that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Ivy Langford, and I thought I'd found peace when I bought my little two-story house on Maple Hollow Drive, a quiet street shaded by sycamores, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves but minds their own business. That illusion lasted until Colin Mercer moved in next door. At first, he seemed normal, a middle-aged contractor with a big truck, endless tools, and an even bigger ego. He'd wave across the lawn, make small talk about home improvement projects, and brag about his custom-built patio. I remember thinking, at least he's handy. Turns out, that was the problem. It started subtly. He began edging his lawnmower further and further over the invisible property line. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grass grows, boundaries blur. But after a few weeks, I noticed his new flower bed had somehow crept a foot into my yard. When I mentioned it, he laughed. "Oh, come on, Ivy. It's just a few inches of dirt. Don't be one of those neighbors." His tone made my skin crawl. I let it go, deciding it wasn't worth a fight over a few inches. But a few inches turned into a few feet. That summer, I finally took a week off, my first real vacation in years. I went hiking with friends in Colorado, leaving my home secure, peaceful, untouched. Or so I thought. When I returned, something felt off. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a brand new wooden fence stretching between our yards. Taller than regulation height, freshly stained, and just slightly wrong. I parked, got out, and walked along the line. My heart started to race. The fence wasn't where the old one had been. It was 3 feet over, slicing into my yard, eating up a strip of grass that had always been mine. 3 feet doesn't sound like much until you see it. It looked like he'd amputated part of my property. My flower bed was gone. My small maple tree, one I'd planted myself the year I moved in, had been ripped out and tossed aside like garbage. I stormed next door, knocking hard on his front door. Colin opened it wearing a smug grin. "Well, look who's back. Like my new fence?" I stared at him, speechless. "You built it on my property." He tilted his head, feigning confusion. "Actually, I checked the line myself. You must have been mistaken before. Happens all the time." My voice rose. "I have the deed. I know where my line is." He shrugged. "Then prove it." And with that, he closed the door. I wanted to scream, but instead, I stood in my driveway, breathing hard, reminding myself not to do anything I couldn't undo. The next morning, I called the city zoning office. They told me to hire a licensed land surveyor to confirm the boundary. I did. Marla Jensen, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair and a laser focus. She came out with measuring tools, documents, and an assistant. For hours, they worked under the sun, while Colin watched from his porch, arms crossed, smirking. When Marla was done, she turned to me and said, "He's over the line, 3 feet, clear as day. You own that strip. I'll file an official report by tomorrow." I thanked her, clutching that validation like armor. But I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. Colin had a way of twisting things. I'd already heard him gossiping to other neighbors about how some people couldn't mind their own business. If I wanted to win this, I couldn't just be right. I had to be strategically right. So I waited. A week later, I received Marla's certified report, stamped, sealed, and signed. Legal proof. I also learned something interesting. Colin hadn't obtained a permit for the fence. That meant he'd violated zoning regulations. That was my opening. I called the local code enforcement officer, Detective Paul Renner, who agreed to review the case. He visited while Colin was at work, walked the boundary with me, and whistled softly. "You've got yourself a textbook encroachment here, Ms. Langford," he said. "He's on your land without authorization." I felt a flicker of satisfaction. What happens now? Legally, you can demand removal or compensation, but given he didn't have a permit, he might face fines too. Want me to file a notice? I nodded. "Yes, please." Renner smiled faintly. "You're calmer than most people I deal with. That's good. Keep it that way." That night, I could hear Colin outside, hammering something on his porch. The rhythmic pounding echoed through the dark, deliberate and angry. When I peeked through the blinds, he was glaring at my house. The next morning, I found tire tracks in my grass. He'd driven across my lawn, twice. I took pictures. 2 days later, I found my mailbox dented. Then, my trash cans mysteriously knocked over. I called Renner again. "Can I report harassment?" He sighed. "Technically, it's vandalism if you can prove it." But stay calm. Keep documenting everything. Once the notice goes through, you'll have leverage. So I documented every petty act, every scrape, dent, or dead plant. It became a ledger of his arrogance. The notice was served 2 weeks later. When Colin found it pinned to his fence post, I watched from my window as he ripped it down and stormed toward my porch. I opened the door before he could start pounding. He waved the paper in my face. "You went to the city? You think you can threaten me with this crap?" "Not a threat," I said. "Just facts." He sneered. "You can't win this. My cousin's a lawyer. We'll fight it." I crossed my arms. "Then get ready to lose in writing." He cursed under his breath and stormed off, slamming his door so hard my windows rattled. But the next day, something changed. He stopped mowing anywhere near my yard. He stopped waving. He just glared. The silence felt heavier than the shouting. For a while, I thought that might be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, I came home from work to find a second fence. Yes, a second one, built even deeper into my yard, right behind the first, like a double layer of defiance. He'd actually moved the posts closer to my house. I stood there on the curb, gripping my keys so tight my hand hurt. My neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Cole, peeked out from her porch and muttered, "That man's lost his mind." She was right. I didn't call the city this time. I called my lawyer. Attorney Samuel Klein wasn't a flashy man, but he knew property law like it was scripture. After reading the reports, he looked up at me and said, "This is open and shut. You own that land. He's trespassing. I'll file for injunctive relief and property restoration." I smiled. "Let's do it." The paperwork took a week. During that time, I made sure Colin saw me measuring the fence myself, clipboard in hand, calm expression. I wanted him to know I wasn't backing down. One afternoon, he shouted across the yard, "You think you're gonna scare me with your little paperwork games?" I met his eyes and said softly, "Not scare, win." He didn't respond. When the court date arrived, Colin didn't show up, which turned out to be the biggest mistake of his life. The judge granted the order in my favor immediately. With that document in hand, I had full legal right to remove the fence and reclaim my property. The police were authorized to assist if necessary. So I made a plan. I waited until a Monday, the day I knew Colin left for his job site at 6:30 a.m. sharp. At 7, I pulled into my driveway with a truckload of help, a demolition crew I'd hired for the morning. They were efficient, cheerful, and, best of all, curious. "Whose fence we taken down, ma'am?" one of them asked, grinning. I smiled. "Mine. Just technically not where it should be." By 8 o'clock, the first post came out of the ground with a satisfying crack. By 9, the entire structure was dismantled, boards stacked neatly at the edge of his property. I even left a little note on the top plank. "Per court order, your materials have been returned. Kindly keep them on your side." At 9:45, a patrol car pulled up, right on schedule. Officer Renner stepped out, looking amused. "You actually did it," he said. "Legally," I reminded him. He chuckled. "That's the best kind." When Colin came home that afternoon, I watched from my window as he stopped dead in his driveway. His jaw dropped. The fence, his monument of arrogance, was gone. In its place stood a clean, open line of grass, freshly marked by city stakes. He stormed toward my door again, fists clenched, but before he could reach it, Officer Renner stepped out from behind his patrol car. "Afternoon, Mr. Mercer," Renner said calmly. "You're trespassing on private property. Step back." Colin froze. She destroyed my fence." Renner held up the papers. Correction, she removed her fence from her land, under court authorization. Colin's face turned red. He sputtered a few curses, but Renner didn't flinch. "You can either step back now," the officer said, "or we can discuss criminal trespass charges." Colin glared at me across the yard, his eyes full of hate, but this time he didn't say a word. He turned, stomped back to his house, and slammed the door. I stood there, silent, victorious. For the first time in months, I felt my yard breathe again. After that day, Colin changed. He no longer mowed near my line. In fact, he barely stepped outside. The flower beds he'd stolen space for withered. His truck disappeared for long stretches. And eventually, he disappeared too. One morning, I noticed a moving truck in his driveway. A real estate sign went up a week later, for sale. He didn't even say goodbye. When the new owners moved in, a young couple with a toddler, the wife came over with cookies and a smile. "We heard the last guy wasn't very friendly," she said. I laughed. "Let's just say the neighborhood's quieter now." Months passed. Seasons changed. I replanted my maple tree right where it had been before. Every time I watered it, I remembered that fence, how something as simple as a wooden line could turn into a declaration of war. But it wasn't just about property. It was about respect and the quiet strength of refusing to be bullied. People think revenge means rage, but it's not always loud. Sometimes it's paperwork, patience, and perfect timing. Because the most satisfying sound in the world isn't shouting. It's the crack of a fence post finally coming out of the ground. Legally, beautifully, completely yours again.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.